So, hi and welcome to the first episode of Boomer Has It. I'm JB Miller in London.
And I'm Jim Jalamas across the pond here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I would normally be in New York City.
That's right. You'll usually be in New York. We're doing a London, New York binational podcast here. Now, first on the name, why have we called it Boomer Has It?
Well, it's an exploration about who we are and how we relate to the rest of society. And I think the key point here is how much how much wisdom, if any, do we bring to discussions on cultural or political issues? Are we biased or do we leverage our experience to actually bring value to our perspectives that we share with listeners? Are you in agreement on that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, but also the name is loaded, I think, because Boomer has it. The Boomer has the wealth and the political strength. They've got the jobs. We aren't kind of moving off the stage yet. Maybe we should. We've got the culture. We have got the dominant culture in a well. That's an argument that can be made, and that ties into actually our first subject, which is the national treasure. What is a national treasure, and why can't the U.S. have any? Why can't you have nice things anymore in America? Um, the national treasure is a particularly British concept, and it's a living person, well known, probably of a certain age, that most people and almost everyone can agree on, um, is a really important person in the culture, is a national treasure. It can't be politicians because by definition, a politician is is going to split the people, the following, its popularity. So it's usually someone, I would say, who's above politics or whose politics you really don't know. So in England, they've done a poll, and the national treasures are people like David Attenborough, Judi Dench, Elton John, Paul McCartney, Joanna Lumley, people like that. Um, and they're probably known to some degree in America, but they're all British. They're all in their upper 70s or 80s or older. They've all been recognized by the king and the prime minister. So they're all either been knighted or damed, something that they don't do in America. Maybe the American equivalent would be getting a Kennedy honor or something. Kennedy honor is usually given to sort of national treasures, wouldn't you say?
I would agree, and I think it's a that term doesn't really work in the U.S. We officially assign national treasures to places
Right. Yeah, that's true.
like the Grand Canyon
Yeah, I
or the
Googled it.
Lincoln Memorial,
Yeah,
right?
I'm talking
So,
places. Yeah.
and then I would say the reason we can't assign a national treasure status to a person is because, as you just pointed out, I think this country is in a rhetorical civil war right now. And sadly, that may be jumping into reality as we see in places like Minneapolis, where there's violence and there's death. So let's try to keep it civil and civil discourse and move this thing forward and try to figure out who would be great candidates for an American
But isn't it,
national treasure.
at this point, it's almost impossible for an American of renown, someone who's really well known, to not take a side politically. I think it was possible 10 years ago, 20 years ago. There are always certain people who are very vocal in their politics. I'm thinking of someone like, Robert De Niro, Bruce Springsteen. It's hard to argue that Bruce Springsteen wouldn't be a national treasure, but he's been very clearly um, on the left, not only on the left, just on the left of center, but he's actually campaigned for political figures. The last time I saw him in concert was at a political rally for John Kerry um, in the Midwest in 2004. So he's always lent his fame to Democratic candidates. So he's a very political figure, but can he still be a national figure? I would think it probably alienates some people at this point.
Well, let's maybe step back a minute and talk about the ground rules. What is a national treasure? They're people who are alive with longstanding contributions to our society in the US. And maybe you might think of 20th century national treasures or 21st century national treasures who aren't with us anymore. And you might start with someone like Mark Twain. I have a modest list. Will Rogers, Mae West,
Yeah,
Helen Keller, James Cagney,
yeah,
Scott
absolutely.
Fitzgerald, Tennessee Williams, Ted Williams in the sports
Yeah,
arena, Jackie
yeah,
Robinson,
yeah,
Lucille Ball, Mr. Rogers,
yeah.
and maybe add Alfred Hitchcock with an asterisk
Well, he's British, but I
because
mean,
he's British.
the-
But the point being, maybe they had political leanings. We're just not aware of them. We just forgot about them. But to
well,
your point,
yeah,
Bruce Springsteen, no, not half, a segment of this country. I would object to saying half the country because 77 Americans who
yeah,
voted for Trump,
yeah. That's
that number is probably eroded.
yeah,
But there's still a civil war, a
yeah.
rhetorical civil war
Well,
happening. I would.
here's my list. I put a list together of possible um, U.S. national treasures, and let me know if you agree with me that these are maybe not so political. You wouldn't necessarily know what the politics are, and so maybe more people can agree on them. People like Meryl Streep, Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Harrison Ford. You can see I'm very into movies here. Taylor Swift, despite only being about 35, and she was forced to kind of admit that she had voted for a Kamala Harris. She didn't tell people to vote for Kamala Harris, but she said she was voting for Kamala Harris. It's sort of hard to argue she's not a national treasure. Tom Brady, LeBron James, Aaron Rodgers, Michael Jordan. Um,
Can't say Aaron Rodgers.
no.
He's anti-vax,
Oh, okay.
pro-Trump.
Oh, I didn't
He's
even know
out.
that. I didn't even know who he
He's
was.
out.
Saw him on a list. What about?
Fair enough. But when it comes to sporting people, I took a personal poll, and a lot of people named Steve Kerr, who's the coach of the Golden State Warriors. He's a pretty great human being, incredible athlete on the court, incredible coach,
I've
a
never heard
big
of.
heart. Yeah, well, he spoke at the Democratic National Convention with great passion, so he's out.
He's
And I noticed if you really want to get to the heart of this, you got to find people who maybe are a little boring. And in terms of coaching, one of the most widely admired, not political coaches is Coach K, Coach Krzyzewski from Duke, one of those winningest coaches in college basketball history. Um, he's kind of a Zen master on the court. We look to him for strategy and intellectual strength and emotional forbearance. He has a philanthropy, so we love him.
All right.
He speaks at corporate events to
I mean,
inspire people,
I've,
but he's a little boring. He's a little boring
I've
in
never
the end.
I've never heard of him, and I wonder if they can only be sports figures that like just about everybody has heard of, like Tiger Woods or Michael
No,
Jordan,
good point. Tiger
something
Woods,
like
we
that.
can't
I
do
mean, I
either.
wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, I was saying that until about 10 years ago, someone like Woody Allen would have definitely been on that list, but he's run into his personal issues with his family. Um, that's complicated. He's become an incredibly controversial figure, not through his politics, through his personal life. So he's not on the list. Um, I mean, in England, I think someone like David Beckham would probably have to be on the list because everybody knows who he is, and he's sort of a national treasure. But someone of that kind of fame, who's sports related in America. But I guess, I guess my point is in bringing up this particular subject is that it's really about how everything in America has become politicized in the last year, certainly. And and I noticed that there was an article in the Washington Post a couple of days ago that said that even formerly, apolitical groups like like a like a subreddit called Cat Bongos, which is all about people playing drums on their cats, playing bongo with their cats, which has 800,000 members, I might add, um, have the leader of that Reddit came out and said, if you are supporting ICE raids, you are not welcome on this subreddit. And some people dropped out, but he had thousands and thousands of people, um, agreeing with him and supporting him. And there've been all these other subreddit groups and Reddit. I know the difference between a Reddit subreddit and a Reddit group, but anyway, all of these groups that formerly would have been just totally non-political have been forced out into the political arena. You have to state what side you're on. And I think,
At the expense of sounding opportunistic, maybe, I mean, they have 800, this cat bongo has 800,000 followers.
yeah, we have to get on that.
Maybe, could we do a bongo?
Yeah, Boomer has it bongos. Yeah.
The boomer bongo.
Well, Boomer bongos, and we should just limit it to cats. Anyone who's dog bongo, child bongo, we'll get in trouble with
Butt bongo.
no child services here. But yeah, let's get on that. Let's get in on that if we can. But I think I was interested in this subject because I think in England it's easier so far to be sort of non-political. You're not forced into the political arena like in America. I think you would feel at this point that you really have to be. There's no standing on the sidelines anymore, which is incredibly sad. And I always think culture should be above politics in some ways. It should be timeless. It should be ageless. It shouldn't be, tied down into the muck of what's going on from day to day. But that's just not possible anymore, I think, in the States. Would you say that?
I mean, and maybe with some luck, someone that we might identify as a national treasure, maybe sometime in the future, they can re-enter the possibility of being a national treasure after all this passes. But maybe it won't pass.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It'll take. I don't know how long that will take. But
Well, I mean, again, some of the people on your list overlap with mine. So Steven Spielberg, that's easy, and we can think about his contributions. There isn't, there's frequently you'll see the idiom, "We need a bigger boat," right?
yeah,
That's straight from Jaws.
right.
It's ingrained in American society.
Mhm.
E.T. phone home, someone might say,
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
a
yeah,
humorous
exactly. The
way to get,
lexicon.
back to
Yeah,
someone. So
yeah. If
I
you
think
don't
it's
know what
pretty
it is.
easy to prove that Steven Spielberg is a national treasure. It's hard to debate who he is.
Yeah. But
I'm
that
not going to go down. I'm not going to go down the road to say if someone has a bone to pick with him, they could politicize. They could easily fabricate a
okay.
politicized
But
attack on him. But
the next
let's
question.
not wish that on
No,
anybody.
no, but the question is now, I think the question now has to be, is is the fact that we don't necessarily know what someone like Meryl Streep's politics are, is that
We do know what they are.
do we?
She's been vocal. She's been
Oh, I did
vocal
not.
in
All right, I missed
award
that.
ceremonies. Sweet
All right.
mother of God, what rock did you crawl out from
Okay.
under?
All right. Well then, well, my question goes for someone who would normally be a national figure whose politics we don't know. Is that a strike against them now? Do we think less of them because they aren't coming out and
Well, I have a few candidates, and
yeah,
I mentioned Coach K, right?
all right.
So I think because he's somewhat stone cold, and we don't have a sense of his politics or his passions. And I think being a national treasure in 2026, you risk being a little bit boring.
Yeah.
Now, I do have a couple of other examples. Would you say Bill Murray?
Yes, sure. I'd guess so. I'm not a huge fan
He,
of his, but I think he's a one of a kind and people really like him and he's become a sort of teddy bear figure at this point, right?
I would say that, and his political proclivities are a mystery.
Yeah.
We know he likes poetry a little bit, but
Harrison Ford.
he's kind of like the uncontrollable teenager in a classroom or something, which we kind of love.
There were some accusations of sexual misconduct or unwanted groping, I think, on a recent film set, but maybe that wasn't enough of a big story. Although,
Maybe not.
um, I mean, Harrison Ford, what about him? Do we know what his politics are?
I they don't come to mind. But would he really be a national treasure?
Star Wars and
Yeah, I guess
uh,
so.
Empire, whatever. No, the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, those are, yeah, I think he's a, but maybe I'm expressing my boomerhood here because maybe people of our children's generation aren't that aware of him. He's on an Apple TV series, I think, or he's
Yeah, where he's a cranky therapist,
cranky.
cranky aging therapist.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
yes.
it's not like he's not on television or people don't know
I
who he is.
I have another one.
Okay.
Steve Martin.
I think that's a good one. I think Steve Martin's a good one because I think I don't really know what his politics are, and I think everyone likes him. Yeah, I think, but is he the rare national figure whose politics are largely unknown, do you think?
I I I think they are completely unknown, and I think it's there's a little bit of wisdom when you're an actor or you're someone who's out of your depth when it comes to talking about politics or economics, and you keep your mouth shut because God forbid you say weird things sometimes. People, I don't know, Susan Sarandon, for example, is a great example of someone who's taken up the mantle of a political activist who just sounds
Yeah,
incredibly out there.
yeah,
Just
I mean, and she'll say anything. I mean, and I feel she will latch on to almost whatever's the latest. I think she's lost some political credibility, some political capital by maybe announcing too many political views over the years. Is that fair?
I think it's totally fair. Mark Ruffalo is another one who, God bless him, he's a liberal activist, puts his money where his mouth is, but sometimes his mouth says weird things in interviews.
What
Where,
weird thing is Mark Ruffalo saying?
I saw him on Bill Maher, and he talked about how I think he meant to say the the corporate communications firm Ogilvy, Adams, and Reinhardt had taken up a negative cause, a conservative cause, and he completely got the name wrong.
Oh,
Reinhardt and Adams and Grossman and Fabricant,
all right. Well, it's hard to
you know,
remember those.
and he was so angry. He was so angry. And I
Oh,
felt sorry, but it was a cringe moment, but his heart's in
yeah.
the right place. And,
Well, that's
but
why that's why I think when Taylor Swift, who is, one of the most famous people on the planet at this point, when she did come out last year, the year before last, and announced that she was voting for Kamala Harris, to me that had huge political weight because she had built up all this political capital because she hadn't always been talking about politics. She was a kind of a reluctant um, you know, political supporter at that point. And she had nothing to gain, I think, um, for coming out with her political support. It would have been fine if Kamala Harris had been elected. The fact that Trump got reelected, made things a bit tough for Taylor Swift, and she had really everything to lose by doing it. I had a lot of respect that she did come out on that point.
that's a very good point because not only did she have nothing to gain, but she could have lost listeners and
I think she
fans
probably, I think she
who
probably
are
did, though. I
have
think
a conservative
I
affiliation
think
because
she
of their
probably did.
parents or
She probably did.
because they attended Turning Point USA
Sure,
meetings.
she probably did. I mean, it probably wasn't, a huge number, and maybe it was a tiny dent in her enormous popularity, but it was probably not nothing. And you can see why she could have stayed on the sidelines, and she would have remained an apolitical, performer. As a lot of people say, why would we even look to cultural figures for their political comments, their political positions. I put more weight in in a cultural figure, that I I agree with, but someone on the right who comes out, someone like, I don't know, Steven Seagal, it's hard for me to think of who the culture figures on the right are, but if there are some, and there's when they come out and support Trump, I think that's just ridiculous. Why would she listen? Why would we listen to him? Well, then why would we listen to someone on the left for the same reason? Uh,
Actually, that's an interesting point, though. Can you think of anyone that you might have thought of as a national treasure, or put it this way, just a performer, cultural figure, writer, artist that you admired who disappointed you because they've embraced some aspect of conservatism or MAGA?
Yes, but I have to go back many years. You mentioned James Cagney. I mean, I happen to know what the political affiliation was for a lot of the 1930s Hollywood actors because I'm very interested in that period of history, Hollywood history, and I kind of don't like the fact that it makes a difference to me that I know that Edward G. Robinson was a lefty and James Cagney was a righty. It shouldn't make any difference. You can't tell it from their acting. But people like Henry Fonda were extremely conservative. It made a difference in the 1960s when there was a clear generational divide, and Henry Fonda had, as it happens, had two famous children, Peter Fonda and Jane Fonda, who were extremely politically active in the 60s, and their father was very conservative. We saw it with Ronald Reagan and his kids. That was a generational divide. Yeah, Bob Hope, I'm a bit disappointed that he was so right wing, to the point where he was, pro-Vietnam. He was pro-war during the Vietnam era. But you can't argue with it. All of the what were they called? Those he would visit the troops on the front, the USO tours, to some
No, it's
considerable
an
risk.
interesting point.
Yeah, he risked his life entertaining the troops, but he was supportive of the Vietnam War. Woody Allen once was asked what he thought of Bob Hope, and he made the point of saying, politic, politic, politically aside, I'm a huge fan. He made it that difference. He was a big fan of Bob Hope, but not Bob Hope's politics. How about
Well, you know what? Think about this, though. Times have changed, right? So conservatism in the 40s or 50s was a lot different than it was now. Let's not forget Eisenhower was a Republican, the two-term president. He built the highway system in America. Conservatives then were,
No, no,
you
Jim, you're
know,
forgetting House, the House On-American Activities Committee. There were Hollywood careers destroyed because
well,
they
good
were
point.
accused of being, communist or communist sympathizers. There were real lines drawn. There were anti-union. There was the people who were against. There were powerful. There were some studio heads who were totally anti-union. Um,
Sure there were, but I mean, it was a four-legged stool, conservatism in those days, which was a strong defense, anti-union,
hmm,
laissez-faire economics. I forget what the fourth one is, but it could be any number of things.
hmm.
It was a much milder form of conservatism
No,
that
that's
than
true.
what we understand
You don't
today.
even
And
have
and you can
conservative.
I mean you can even throw Jimmy Stewart in there if
Yeah,
you're going to go back to the era. But something, some breaking news today um, that made me realize that, I once had some, I once saw the light on conservatism, and free markets and what it means. And David Brooks today signed off from his regular column after 20 years at the New York Times. And he resigned his status as a Republican, but he came into the national dialogue as a kind of a very moderate conservative with intellectual leanings who would
yeah,
quote people like Edmund Burke or
yeah.
even Alexander Hamilton, right? He had this
Right.
point of view, and
He's an
you
he's
know,
he's an old he's a old time New York Times conservative or a Republican. I mean, I would imagine Bret Stephens is probably more conservative than he is. The more recent columnists on the right of the New York Times are quite conservative, and they were brought in, I would think, to sort of push back on the on the criticism that the New York Times was too left wing. Uh,
Sure. Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
David Brooks, he was always showing off a bit. I thought Brooks had always a bit of a um, um, self-infatuated prose in a way, but I admire him, and he was consistent with his views, and I think you're right. He was a almost a small C conservative, and a small R Republican, maybe if there was
I
such.
think small C is a good way of putting it. And then in the last few years, he had a kind of personal awakening that I think coincided with his divorce. And he had a lot of sort of self-improvement messages that he felt were really a part of society. And in the sign-off today, he sort of talked about I would associate with this economic principle creative destruction, where industries fall apart and then they reinvent themselves. This is a very, again, laissez-faire economic principle. But he talked about from the destruction of colleges and universities as we know them, and that they've created opportunities for new channels of learning within academia, which I thought was interesting. And I could see how he could appeal to Pollyannas
I
everywhere.
think
And I
he
think his next destination, I think, is at Yale, or as he put
right.
it, New Haven.
Well, to get back to
Um,
our subject, do you think he could be a national treasure? Could a columnist be a national treasure? And I asked this because you mentioned earlier, you brought up the name Will Rogers, and for all intents and purposes, Will Rogers was a columnist, really. I mean,
he absolutely was.
he was
Yeah,
a national
absolutely.
columnist. Besides
More than anything. More
more
than
than
anything.
anything, he was a prototype of a video figure in a way because they would make short films. He was right, or he was on the anyway. People knew what
He
he.
was originally a vaudevillian,
Yeah, if I,
and he made his way into Hollywood.
this was in the
He was a Hollywood performer. Yeah,
1930s. So it's
1930s. But how he found his way into writing a national column is sort of just based on his persona of everyday decency, everyday Americanness, which really makes him a national treasure in that sense.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, he's the exception to the rule because I don't think there are many national columnists who could possibly be national treasures because they tended to be popular often because they were either very left wing or very right wing or very pop.
Or just not popular enough. I would say Russell Baker would fall into that
All
category, but
right.
but not a household name really.
How about Charles M. Schultz? Peanuts. You know,
Yeah,
I think he would have been a national treasure, or at least Snoopy would have been. And then who were the
but
other?
not Lucy. Lucy
No,
couldn't be.
no, Lucy was
No, no, too mean.
she was very mean. But Doonesbury, I guess, couldn't because Doonesbury was a political cartoon in a way.
Right? Yeah, polarizing
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. So do you think you're looking forward to some time when they'll be easier to identify, it'll be easier to identify US national treasures. I don't know when that will be. Um,
I think you could be a national treasure if you just raise your profile a little bit and keep your mouth shut about
Jim,
MAGA
that's very kind. That's very generous of you. Um,
and
so
move back. We need to take into account for readers that we're on the ball here. We're not just baby boomers who have an absolute opinions. We listen, we learn, we observe, and we process. And that the national treasure is a term. It's in the Gen Z and millennial argot, and it means someone that you really love, that you really adore. In my daughter's opinion, someone who's a national treasure would be someone like the actress Renee Rapp, who's interesting all by herself because
who is she? Who's
she
Renee
left
Rapp?
a she left a very successful TV show called Sex Lives of Comic College Girls to pursue a musical career, and she's a huge personality. She uses the term national treasure if you hear her talk. And
What
according to
does it mean?
Antonia,
What does it mean?
someone who's a national treasure who's male
Yeah.
is someone she could trust her drink with at a club. or bar. And a female national treasure would be someone she'd feel comfortable wearing a bikini in front of, someone who would not say, "Are you sure that really fits you?"
Would that be considered hyperbole to call that person a national treasure?
I would, well, based on our definition, it's absolutely hyperbolic for sure.
Because
But that leads
many
me,
people nationally know your friend who will hold your drink during at a club or say that you look marvelous. That's a personal pleasure, treasure.
well, I mean, I wouldn't trust Woody Allen to hold my daughter's drink or to be around her in a bikini.
All right, fair enough, fair enough.
So
He,
the criteria works in that
yeah,
context for
he's a
sure.
local treasure, not a national treasure, because you can't take him just anywhere. Only certain places that have CCTV coverage. Fair enough. I haven't asked my children yet whether national treasures would be. I'll get around to that. They've been very busy lately. Do you have any recommendations for this week? And
Um,
what we're going to call it? Something quake. What did I
Headquake,
Headquake. What's your
a
headquake?
headquake, which is let's define it, right? It's things you don't like that give you a headache, or things you do like that make your head quake, like the Quakers used to do when they reached a moment of divine passion.
I don't think that's a useful word at all because it means two different things. It's hard to nail it down. Um, Maybe there should be add an add an E to the end if it's a positive thing or
How about head quack?
head quack. All right, head. Anyway, what is your head quack?
My head quake is, and it's because I sort of share this with my daughter Antonia. Right, is that um, I've just I'm reading the book, haven't quite finished yet. It's called Lost Lambs by Madeline Cash. It's a really hot book. And I was lucky enough to get an autographed copy when the author gave a talk at McNally Jackson Bookstore about a
Oh,
week ago.
if you had it with you, you could hold it up. You don't have it on you, do by any chance, do you? So our viewers at home can see what it is. Add some visual element to this.
Now
Oh,
you have to read it backwards.
okay.
It's in code.
No, that came out positive.
Oh, good. Anyway, it's if you read it, it's now this is the baby boomer part of me, right? I read this book and I see Mark Lehner, I see Kurt Vonnegut sort of blended with Roz Chast.
Wow, that's
And
thick.
on the back cover, there's a blurb that describes it as a Pynchon paradise.
Wow.
And I think it's because it's a little removed from reality and it revolves around a family whose lives are in turmoil. And it's set in a fictional Coast town called Alabaster Harbor. And the local stores have names like a 19th century themed British pub called, ready?
Yeah.
Olive or Twist.
Okay, that's good. All right, we'll keep that in mind. We're gonna have to wrap this up pretty soon. I was gonna just have a quick reference point to I'd seen The Offer, which is a series on Paramount about the making of The Godfather. But in fact, I'd rather see, or I'd like to see a film about the making of The Offer, which is about the making of The Godfather, because I really like films about films, like a Nouvelle Vague, which just came out, which is about the making of Breathless. But I'd be just as happy of seeing a film about the making of Nouvelle Vague, which was about the making of Breathless. Films about films. So that's my offer up. Uh,
Oh, wait. We do have a letter from a listener.
oh yeah, yeah.
It's from Lindsay Bougainvillea
Uh-huh.
from somewhere in Virginia. Why are baby boomers so cranky and inflexible? Is it emblematic of your generation or an effect of aging? Tell me if you agree. I have to applaud Lindsay for her use of the word emblematic, but I have to caution her that the AP style guide does not capitalize baby boomer or millennial, but does capitalize Gen Z
That's
and Gen Y.
for a
And
nickname.
then I have nothing else to say to her,
All right.
actually.
Well, I got a letter from Lisa Delisandro from Melbourne, Australia, who writes, "Hi guys, do you know why the boomerang? which I don't quite understand with the boomerang. No, I don't know why the boomerang. And she says, because he didn't know how to text. That's
Hardy
from
har har.
Lisa Delisandra, age 37 and a half. So I think we'll leave it there. Great letters in the mailbag. And we hope to continue this discussion next time. Until then, Boomer has it. Boomer has it.
I'm Jim Jalamas from Pittsburgh.
I'm JB Miller in London. We'll see you
Good
soon.
night and good morning.